Sometimes, the uniform that's supposed to protect you is the one that humiliates you the most. What happens when a man who risks his life for justice is treated like a criminal by the very people he thought were on his side? This is the story of betrayal, hidden strength, and a moment that changed one undercover agent's life forever. Stay till the end and hit subscribe. You won't want to miss how this ended. Agent Darius Cole had always known what it meant to wear two faces. By day, he sat in windowless offices in D.C., briefing senior FBI officials on gang infiltration tactics. By night, and often for days at a time, he was just another face on the streets of Chicago's South Side, blending in with dealers and hustlers, memorizing secrets that could put entire crime families away. For 6 months straight, Darius had been living as Rick, a small-time gun runner looking to climb the ladder. His beard was overgrown, his car was beat up, he wore second-hand hoodies, and Timberlands scuffed at the toes. To the outside world, he looked like every young black man the city had given up on, which was exactly how he stayed alive. NNBUT that night. It wasn't a gang member or cartel enforcer who nearly destroyed him. It was the blue lights flashing behind him as he pulled onto 79th Street after a long meet with a buyer. He'd noticed the cruiser in his rear view for blocks, tailing him like a shadow. He knew the neighborhood, knew what those lights usually meant for men who looked like him, but Darius couldn't risk blowing his cover with a chase. So he pulled over, turned off the ignition, and waited. NNTWO officers, both young, white, nervous, approached on either side. Their hands hovered over their holsters before Darius even rolled down the window. He kept his voice calm, the same way he'd been trained. Evening, officers. Everything all right? They didn't answer. The one on his left, badge reading Marshall, just barked. License and registration. Hands where I can see 'em. Darius did exactly as told. Slow, deliberate movements. But it didn't matter. Within seconds, the door yanked open. Cold air rushed in. A hand gripped his hoodie, dragging him out onto the cracked asphalt. In. Face down. Knees in his back. Hands forced behind him. The weight of a knee pressing his cheek into a patch of ice. He didn't say he was FBI. He couldn't. Not yet. If they were dirty, or if they panicked, his cover, his life, could be gone in a heartbeat. NNHE felt the metal click of cuffs locking around his wrists. A small crowd formed on the sidewalk. A few teenagers pulled out their phones, whispering. He could feel their eyes on him. Some mocking, some pitying. He'd spent months cultivating fear and respect in this neighborhood. Now he was just another brother pinned to the street. When they hauled him up, Officer Marshall sneered. "What you got on you, huh? You running guns? Drugs? Stand still!" They spread him against the cruiser, legs apart, hands still cuffed. The pat-down was rough, humiliating. They emptied his pockets, a burner phone, some cash, a fake ID, and finally, tucked deep inside his jacket, the small leather case he kept for emergencies. Marshall ripped it open, half expecting drugs or a stolen wallet. What he found made him freeze, and inside was Darius's real badge, gold, heavy, unmistakable. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that fell was so sharp, Darius could hear his own heartbeat. NNTHE, other officer peered over Marshall's shoulder. His face went pale. For a moment, Darius almost felt sorry for them. Almost. NNHE held their eyes, voice calm but shaking with something deeper. Rage, disappointment, exhaustion. You just put your knee on an undercover federal agent. NHE could see Marshall's lips move, searching for some excuse, some explanation that wouldn't come. Darius knew exactly what they were thinking. How could this nobody be one of them? NNHE took a breath. In training, they told him to de-escalate, to show the badge early. But the streets taught him something different, that sometimes the only power a black man has is the silence that forces others to look at what they've done. When they uncuffed him, he didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He didn't shove back. He just stood there, rubbing the red lines on his wrists, watching these two officers stumble over apologies that meant nothing. One of them muttered, "You fit the description." But Darius knew there was no description, just a profile. The same profile that had him face down on the street while real criminals slipped away into the dark. Later, he'd write it up in his report. He'd testify at a hearing. He'd get a call from a deputy director thanking him for his restraint, telling him this was unfortunate but understandable. NNBUT. None of that would erase the truth that settled in his bones that night. The badge in his pocket could shield him from bullets, from criminals, even from the law, but not from the eyes that refused to see him as anything more than a threat. When he drove away, Darius didn't look back at the cops still standing dumbstruck under the streetlight. He thought of the gang meeting he'd just left. Men with rap sheets longer than his entire file. Men who trusted him more than the uniform that claimed to protect them. In the end, it wasn't the undercover work that broke him. It was realizing that no matter how deep he went, no matter how many lives he saved, he'd never be undercover enough to hide from the truth that night gave him. And in that truth, he found something stronger than any badge. A resolve to stay alive, to keep fighting, and to never let the uniform define the man wearing it. Darius drove for hours that night, past shuttered storefronts, liquor stores still buzzing with half-lit neon signs, past the block where his mother had raised him alone, past the high school he'd left behind with dreams too big for the hallways they tried to keep him in. NNHE pulled over on a side street lined with brownstones and sat there in the dark. The city hummed outside his window. Car horns, laughter, the occasional wail of a distant siren. But inside the car, it was quiet. Too quiet. NHE took the badge out again, turned it over in his hands. For years, this little piece of metal had been his shield. Proof that he was one of the good ones. Proof that he'd made it out. Or so he'd told himself. But tonight, under the weight of those cops' knees, that illusion cracked, and a part of him wanted to storm into the precinct, slam his credentials down on the desk, demand they pay for the humiliation. But he knew better. The Bureau would bury it in paperwork, call it a misunderstanding, remind him of the bigger mission. His brothers in the neighborhood would see the news, shake their heads, and say he got what he deserved for working with them in the first place. And maybe, in a twisted way, they wouldn't be wrong. NNHE thought about his father, a man he barely knew, who'd done 2 bids before Darius turned 5. He thought about the first time he'd seen a badge and believed it meant safety. How naive he'd been. Hours passed before he started the engine again. He drove to the edge of town where the city lights gave way to pitch-black fields. He parked by the river and stepped out. The cold bit through his thin hoodie, but he welcomed it. He stood there under the stars, holding that badge over the water. NHE wanted to throw it in, watch it sink to the bottom like every promise they'd made him. But he didn't. Not tonight, NHE, because for every cop who saw him as a threat, there were kids on those corners who saw him as hope, even if they'd never know his real name. There were mothers who slept easier because men like him risked everything in the dark. There was a future worth fighting for, even if the present was broken. NNSO, he slipped the badge back into his pocket. He wasn't done yet. When he got back in the car, his phone buzzed. A coded message from his handler. New target. Same neighborhood. Big meet tomorrow. Darius let out a breath. He adjusted his rearview mirror, catching his own tired eyes staring back. He thought of the knee in his back, the streetlight overhead, the hush of the crowd watching him kneel where he'd once sworn he'd never kneel again. Then he shifted into drive. Tomorrow he'd be Rick again. Tomorrow he'd shake hands with men who'd kill him for a rumor. Tomorrow he'd smile in their faces and gather every secret that would tear them down brick by brick. NBUT tonight. For this moment alone, he was just Darius Cole, a black man who knew exactly who he was, no matter who tried to strip that away. And as he pulled back onto the road, he promised himself one thing. Next time, they wouldn't get the chance to put him on his knees. NNIF. You're still here. Thank you for watching. And if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. There are more truths to tell, and together, we'll keep telling them.